Hello, Paul. Welcome to the Wax Museum.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So, Paul, you're a very interesting guy. I've said multiple times to you that you're like Forrest Gump. You got this story that goes on. Was like, seriously, how did you pack all of this into? Like, you're 30, maybe? How old are
30
you?
years old, yeah. Turned
Yeah,
30 in
yeah. So
December.
I'm like, it's you've packed a lot into your life. So I just thought we'd do a Wax Museum episode on your life thus far.
Cool. Let's
So
do it.
tell me your story, Paul.
Yeah. Is this testimony time, as they say?
Yes, testimony time.
Let's do it.
Testify.
Let's do it. Oh, gosh. You just want me to start at the beginning, like when I was a kid and stuff? Or like, how do you want me to break down the
Sure,
story?
yeah. If you want to start with when you were a kid, what was it like growing up did you grow up in Georgia?
I did. I was born at Cobb County Hospital. It's called something else now. But at the time, in 1990, it was called Cobb County Hospital. It's in Austell, Georgia, which is right the outskirts of Atlanta, about 30 minutes from downtown Atlanta. And grew up in and around there. My dad is a pastor, a preacher, and my mother was a school teacher. They raised me and my younger brother. I have a younger brother who's 2.5 years younger, and that's our little family unit. It was a good family, good parents, good brothers, still really close with all three of them. No parents are perfect, but I think my parents are pretty close. We have a lot of good times together. We still have a lot of good times laughing and just hanging out. And we're very similar in a lot of ways, and then we're also different in some ways. I think my brother takes after my mother a lot in personality, and also I think just personality and like giftings and struggles. And then I take after my dad. I'm a lot like my dad, cut from that same jib. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, I guess. So my dad's a very charismatic, funny, I guess sometimes melodramatic person, or he's very emotional, and I took that from him, which I'm happy about. I like who I am in my skin, and I like that I'm like my dad. Let's see.
So because of the similarities between you and your dad, did that make you think that you were going to be a pastor when you grew up?
I do know there's a story when I was like, I don't know, like elementary age. We were at like the kitchen table, and I said, I want to be like daddy when I grow up. And mom and dad were like, oh, that's real sweet. And then I said, yeah, I want to be a pastor. And they were like, oh, that's really like kind of misty eyed. And then dad was like, is that right? Why is that? And I said, because dad's the most popular one in the church. So it had nothing to do with like a calling or anything holy. I just love people, and can at times be codependent. Discovered that through years of therapy. But I don't know. That's a good question. There have been times I thought I would be a pastor. Maybe I still will be one day. I don't know what God's plan is. I was a youth director for a while, which I think youth pastors and youth directors are kind of like cops. Like a lot of the people that are drawn to those jobs shouldn't have those jobs. This is an interesting thing. I only lasted like 6 months before I got out of there. I was like, I can't do this.
So why would you say those people shouldn't be in those jobs? Like they abuse their power like a cop does, or what do you think's going on there?
Yeah, and let me be clear. Like I think there are some, not some. There are a lot of like youth pastors, youth directors that are doing good stuff, as well as this applies to pastors in general, I think. Or cops. Like I know good cops, I know good pastors, but I mean, one doesn't have to pay too much close attention to the news to realize like there is a problem with lack of accountability in these types of positions. And a lot of times people drawn to like the position of pastor or policeman or any position of authority really is drawn to it for the wrong reasons, I would say. I think there's a large enough pool of people to where I don't know what the answer is, but it's alarming sometimes that, I mean, different people and different news comes to mind of the past recent months, you know?
Would you say there's a certain amount of narcissism that puts someone in a position? And I think like those are savior kind of jobs, you know, like I find like pastor, policeman, teacher's one of them too. I used to be a teacher too. But it's like, that's another one where it's like, you can have kind of a savior complex and it's like, I need to do this so I can make a difference in people's lives, which can be good. But on the narcissism side, it becomes very unhealthy.
Yeah. I actually just met a pastor today. I was just at lunch and his name was also Paul. We started talking. He pastors a church in Macon, Georgia. And we happened to be in the same town. And I just made a comment about I liked his shirt. His shirt said prayer, faith, therapy. I said, oh, I like your shirt. And then we just started talking. And because I've done a lot of vocational ministry on and off throughout my life. And then also growing up a pastor's kid, I tend to have a lot of empathy for pastors. And I think there are really godly pastors. Like there are a few that come to mind, and my dad's one of them that are really, they're not drawn to it for ego or narcissism. But there are also a lot that come to mind that have been part of my life that are. And you can suss that out pretty quickly. It becomes evident over time. And I think that's why a lot of people have church hurt, because they're in a church where, like you said, people are drawn to this position of authority where the ego takes over. What's odd and what's interesting is a lot of these pastors with those problems, I think they start with good intentions. I think they not just good intentions, with good actions.
Yeah.
And what happens is, and I think this could apply to all of them, policemen, pastor, teacher, like you said, if you don't place the right accountability around you, or if you don't listen to the accountability that's around you, that's when it becomes an issue. Because if you have people that keep you in check, you're like, hey, dude, what are you doing? Then nobody's perfect. And like, you should never expect your pastor or your priest to be perfect, because they're going to mess up and they're going to fail you. But it's when they are doing something that's off or narcissistic, or the ego's taking control, and people step in, elders step in, or deacons step in, or other pastors or friends or family members, and say, hey, congregants, like, hey, this isn't right. Like, this doesn't line up with scripture. This doesn't line up with what you're preaching and what you're doing. Like, you're preaching one thing and then you're behaving the opposite, contradiction of that. And then when a pastor pushes back at that and becomes defensive and starts projecting and starts gaslighting, that's when it's sad and bad. And I do know a lot of occasions where that happens, but I also know a few occasions where the pastor listens and is responsive and says, okay, so where do we go from here? Maybe I need to but if a pastor is listening to that feedback, I think that shows humility.
So you were kind of in and out of ministry, but like it never really stuck. Like you never ended up like consistently serving in a role. Was there a reason why you were in and out?
Yeah. Let me go back to my story. So, I covered the childhood part. We can skip through middle school and high school. Pretty typical. Like I've always had like a rebellious streak in me for sure, but I was a pretty good kid up until my early 20s. Like I liked punk rock and stuff, but I was, straight edge. The first time I drank alcohol, I was 19 years old, but I was in Germany and it was legal. I was actually a missionary. I was an overseas missionary. I guess that's where I can pick up the story. Graduated high school. My senior of high school, when everybody's picking colleges, I was like, I don't want to go to college. Like, college is a joke. And I still feel that way to a degree that Western society, especially America, I'm like one of my MOs is you don't need college. Now, certain people do need college. I think if you're going to be a doctor, you got to go to a lot of college. You got to go to grad school. You're going to be a teacher. That's one too. And there's a few others. But I think a lot of it's like a huge scam of you don't need to go to film school to work in film.
Right.
And I know this as someone who dropped out after one semester of Bible college and then worked in the film industry at a certain point. And now I know this is my story is I'm
we're all over the place here.
Yeah. Because you said I have a life that's a lot like Forrest Gump. The footnotes would be graduated high school, was a missionary overseas through a parachurch evangelical Christian organization made up of like 400 different Christians from over 50 different countries at the time. And we were all living on a ship together was how we traveled. It was like 400 of us. It was wild. And we went all over. We went to the Caribbean, West Africa, North Africa, Southeast Asia, South Central Asia. It was a cool tour.
Was it like a medical thing?
No, that's Mercy Ships.
Yeah, because I'm thinking of Mercy Ships. I wasn't sure if we could name the ministry, so I was going to try to see if it was Mercy Ships.
I was not going to name mine, but I think I've given enough information that if people want to Google it, they can. So we've narrowed it down to a parachurch Christian organization that worked on a ship that's not Mercy Ships. And I think I'm allowed to say that. I mean, that was back in 2010 to 2012. So they're not, but I did have a strange tour and wild stuff did happen. We went to, hold on a second. I think, cause there's certain things I'm not allowed to share. I did go there, like are certain things that if it was recorded, it would not be good for certain people in certain countries. Cause we did go to some secure countries,
right? Which is
crazy, like insane. Like just, I wish I could record on a podcast the story that I want to tell right now, but I'll have to tell you off mic.
But did you see some miracles, like there was cool stuff like that, or was it more so like benevolent kind of?
I would say I saw a lot of miracles. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like in places like West Africa, like I was in Sierra Leone, Ghana, Liberia, some places like that, where people in America, we're all living out of plenty. We're all living out of plenty. Like even the people that think we don't have a lot in America, we're all living out of plenty. Totally. And then in countries like that, the majority of people are living out of want. And they are, I would say by and large, happier than we are because they don't have all this stuff to distract them. I also think when there's not a lot of stuff to distract you, that it's easier to believe in a God of miracles because it's just, there's just less distractions. There's less noise. There's less lights. There's less commercialism, consumerism. They don't really have that stuff. So I think as a believer in Jesus, I think our faith is one of simplicity, and it's really not that difficult, but we unfortunately live in a society we live in a certain society in a certain era that's just so bombarded with like consumerism, capitalism, commercialism, and all these things are huge distractions to just living humbly and living in grace and in love and like the fruits of the Spirit and those things. Cause that's really, I think that's all really that's all following Jesus is living, believing Jesus as Savior and then following him as such.
It seems to me that there's a lot of idols.
A
whole lot of idols in Western society. And one of them is like clearly politics, because it's like so much of our discourse. I mean, we have families breaking up over politics right now. And so it's like, there is something like, even, we did a missions trip to Colombia, and even there, like I could sense that things were different, seeing all these children at, feeding centers and all this stuff. and you just kind of got a sense that there's more faith. You know,
Yeah.
it's like it's more raw. There's more space for faith, and it's like, yeah, I think it is like there's just an atmosphere of idols. There's so many distractions that it's like Jesus is such a smaller portion of the day to day of a Western Christian.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up because one of the countries I was in for several months was India.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, I mean, talking about idols, like there's every street corner, there's like a statuette of some like of an idol that people are sacrificing like chickens to or goats to or whatever.
Wow.
Like it's just everywhere. It's just part of life there. And if you talk to anyone from India and you talk to them and say you're from the United States, one of the first things they say is, "Oh, very idolatrous." And you're like looking around like, we don't have any of this.
Yeah.
But then if you like, you continue to talk to them, they say, well, like all of your homes, there's an altar around the television set and you spend billions of dollars to go to these sporting events and worship these 18-year-old boys or 19-year-old, 23-year-old men in tights, like throwing a pigskin around. And it's like, whoa, that's true. Like we have idolatry just as much, if not more so than a country like India. It just manifests itself in a different way.
So what's it like coming back from like that? How long was the long term on that? How long were you out for?
I was gone almost 2.5 years. So I think it was 2 years and 3 months.
So you come back after 2.5 years back to the church. And what did that feel like?
Sad and depressing. It was hard to, I guess, assimilate back into like Western Christian churchianity. Like, it's like, oh no, like none of this is what the church is like in the rest of the world. And not that the church and the rest of like all churches in all regions have problems, but what is happening in the United States is unique. And I also don't think it's unique. It's happening in a lot of like Western countries, like the UK, European countries, Canada, where you're at, Canada, Australia. I do think it is exacerbated in the United States.
Yeah.
We are the only country that for the past few years has, by and large, white evangelicalism, which is a lot of times what people are referring to when they say like the church, is worshiping this guy who ran for president, who's probably not even a Christian. I mean, I can't speak for him and his faith, but based on things he had not only has said, but continues to say consistently. And I'm like, I don't even know. Like he says, he used the word Christian, but then he also says things like, I don't ask for forgiveness and things like that. Like, it's just, I don't understand.
And it's incredible to hear you say that, because I remember you and I were having a conversation before, and I think I was talking about a lot of this Christianity, what we call Christianity, doesn't have the fruits of the Spirit in it. And I'm like, and I doubt whether those people are Christians. And you said to me, when someone tells me they're a Christian, I believe them. Just like if they say they're a Buddhist or if they say they're Muslim, I believe them. And I was like, wow. And it was very convicting for me in that moment, because I was just like, yeah, I shouldn't be judging that. You know? And I mean, I can say I don't see fruits, but I shouldn't be saying you're not a Christian.
Yeah. And I said, I don't know if he, I don't know if he is, but I also, he is on record as also saying when a bunch of church leaders and elders laid hands to pray for him and then left, all of his aides said, Michael Cohen and his aides corroborated that he said, can you believe people actually believe that shit? So I'm like,
classic Donnie there.
Yeah. It's just, I don't know.
So would you say then, like, did that kind of put you into like a bit of a deconstruction then coming back from that mission trip?
Well, and this particular, what the person we're talking about, that's just been the past few years in politics. When I came back, it was 2012. That hadn't happened yet, but something like that doesn't just happen. Like the what am I trying to say? Like the way had been prepared, and it was very clear to me, like there is something off. Yeah. Just the fact that so many churches from different denominations have an American flag, like in the church next to the altar. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. There's not, we're not even a Christian country as much as people want to say we are. The country was founded by some Christians, but mostly deists, which are not the same thing. And I mean, like, it really doesn't make sense, but people aren't willing to go look at the history and really look into it and study it. And they have the talking points and they talk through it.
I didn't ask, when was your music? When did you do music then? Was that as a teenager that you had your band, or?
Oh yeah. Music's always been a huge part of my life. So, I got my first guitar when I was probably, let me think. Probably the Christmas I turned 12 or 13, I want to say. So like Christmas 2002, maybe. Because my birthday is December 19th. So it's all it was
December 15th for me.
Yeah.
December people.
Yeah. So, and then I was acoustic guitar, and I kind of taught myself. I had a youth pastor at the time that was a really good guitarist. He played a Gibson Les Paul, the Sunburst, like the Sunburst color. And so I played his sometimes, but I had like a little like Fender Squier was my first guitar that my parents bought me for, which is actually a pretty good starter guitar. Still have it. And get really into guitar and like singing and songwriting like around 14, 15. And when you talk about bands, it was just me and buddies from high school goofing off and playing stuff, and was really into pop punk, like just Blink-182 ripoffs or Reliant K ripoffs were most of the things that we wrote. Lots of songs about girls, lots of songs about being emo and heartbroken over girls.
I'm just thinking Marilyn Manson ate my girlfriend.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, for any listeners that are confused, there's an old Reliant K song called Marilyn Manson Ate My Girlfriend. That was their first album.
Oh, it's so great.
That song, it also had Staples on it. And all I could hear was ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk. All you could hear was the doctor putting staples in this punk. That one. Yeah, and then so got really into, and then I think towards the tail end of high school, got more into worship leading. I was the worship leader for my youth group my senior year of high school. And that was me. Like, I was like, I'm going to be a ministry guy. And so, this is good. This is getting us back on track of the story. We went on tangents. We went on tangents on narcissism and pastors and idolatry in India versus idolatry in America. But it's good. I think
there was all much to talk about.
Yeah. But back to my story. That, being a worship leader my senior year of high school, and really into music and stuff. And I also played like a couple shows. There was a place called the Ecclesia Center, which was about 20 miles from where I lived. And they just did shows a lot. Ecclesia, for any Greek scholars out there, does mean church, but it was not a church. It was a show venue that was just started by Christians. It wasn't even only Christians that played it. It was, that was in Royston, Georgia. And there was a band from Greenville, South Carolina called the Lilies and Sparrows, which I would highly encourage you check them out. And I got to be friends with them. They're really good music still out there on Bandcamp and iTunes and Spotify and stuff like that. They're not active anymore, but really good if you like indie rock and stuff. Did some shows with them. They introduced me more and more to music and teaching me more things. And then I kind of seamlessly transitioned into the ministry I was part of, which we would do these big blowout events. Like, we would set up a stage and lights in these more third world countries and do like gospel presentations and culture shows. Like, we do dancing and different things. Like, we had different because we were from so many different countries, there were different cultural dances. Like they have Tininkling in the Philippines. I think for America, we did swing dance. And then we also did, I started sharing my testimony, started preaching a little bit. And so I was kind of a dual person that did worship leading sometimes and spoke some other times. And music continued to play a role in my life. Came back. Now it's 2012. Went and lived in Flagstaff, Arizona, right outside the Grand Canyon. Worked at a Walgreens I was the nighttime clerk at a Walgreens. I think the shift was 10 p.m. to 8 a.m., 7 nights. So it's a 70-hour work week, but then I get the next week off. It was 1 week on, 1 week off. So I was dating a girl at the time, so I kind of want to be awake when she was awake. So I would work the night shift and sleep during the day and go to work and work 70 hours and I would just be missing for a week. And then I would try and give myself like 24 to 48 hours to like shift my cycle. And I was young at the time. I was 21. I was 21, man. Mm. Yeah, I was 21 years old. So it was easy I don't think I could do that now at 30, which is, I know it's only 9 years.
To get older. Yeah.
Oh man. I was like, the thought of this now is like, how did I do that? Like, and it's only 9 years later, but I'm like, good Lord, that's crazy. And was saving money for college. So I lived there from not long. It was just summer of 2012 until like December. And then I enrolled at a small Bible college in Toccoa, Georgia. It's called Toccoa Falls College. And they have these waterfalls there. They're really, really beautiful. They're called Toccoa Falls. The claim to fame is they are higher than Niagara Falls. Now it's much, much smaller than Niagara Falls. It's more like a stream than a waterfall, but it's still very beautiful nonetheless. And, it's a really pretty place, kind of secluded, like in the woods, and lots of like, there's Currahee Mountain, which is like a little mountain climbing. There's, Tallulah Gorge, and lots of swimming and woods and beauty and nature there. I was there for a semester, and then was like, even at the end of the semester, I was thinking like, I still had that in my brain, like, man, screw college. This is not for me. But didn't really know what to do. It was kind of aimless with my life. And through some mutual contacts and different networks and things, there was a young church plant in Washington, D.C. That reached out to me, and they were looking for a youth director. They were 1 year old. And so I went and spent a week with them. They were doing a kids soccer camp. So I did the soccer camp with they had some interns that were there just for the summer from a church in Birmingham, Alabama. So I kind of like teamed up with those interns. I think I gave like a 5-minute testimony to the church congregation, and then the senior pastor offered me a full-time job as youth director / what I called myself minister of miscellaneous, because it was really just everything. It was a young
minister of miscellaneous. I like that.
That's the title I came up with, because he said youth director, but I did everything. I did kids. I did music. Sometimes I did all the I didn't know the job was really what they needed was an administrator, and it was like a Trojan horse of saying it was a youth director, because I could do that. Like I could preach messages and work with youth. Like I like that, and I'm good at it. But the administration stuff, like they suffered and I suffered. I was like, this is not my gifting or my wheelhouse. And I was only there for a few months. It ended up being, at the time, I think was a very unhealthy church. There was a lot of talking about narcissistic pastors. There was a lot of, there's so many funny things that happened at that church. I'll say one story, because I'm not going to name the pastor of the church. This senior pastor at one point, like there was this homeless guy, beautiful guy, really like heart for the Lord. He lived in a tent behind the Chevron gas station that was close to my apartment. And I don't even think I was the first one that met him. I think someone introduced us. I was like, y'all live close together. And he would come hang out at the apartment I was living at sometimes. And he was at church all the time. He would just, I think we were doing 2 services. He would just come like before first service and leave. He was like first one there, last one to leave. And he really was absorbing, I think, the word. Like he was reading his Bible throughout the week. Like he knew Bible verses better than I did. Like he was really following God. And it was really inspiring to see. And the senior pastor had the audacity to come up to this man and say, hey, we really enjoyed having you with us. And like, so glad you're part of this community. Now, your appearance is a little bit distracting when you sit on the front row. So if you could find a place that's like more in the back, I was like, I was like, have you read your Bible? Because like James literally says, don't do that. Like if you read the book of James, who was written, the little brother of Jesus, James, like he wrote it. He said, don't do this. Don't say to certain people they can sit in the front and others in the back. Like, not even like, you know, it's just like, do you even read your Bible, dude? And so that's one story out of many that I could share. And so I'm this little like 22-year-old punk at this point. This is 2013. And I'm like, cussing out the pastor at every staff meeting. Like the unordained youth director is just like most of our meetings in with me, like yelling at the senior pastor at the top of my lungs, cussing him out, which is also not the greatest way to behave, not very gentle. Jesus, you know, scripture says, let your gentleness be evident to all.
Yeah.
But it was no buts. You should be gentle. That's a really hard situation for someone as young as me and as spiritually immature as I was at the time to be in. So in between, actually it was New Year's Eve, 2013 to 2014, I got fired. Which like we all took. I don't know how I lasted 6 months. I lasted from June to January. I was like, wow, that's crazy. Cause 3 weeks in, I was like, drawing lines in the sand, like I'm not trusting you, dude. And so that's pretty wild. I got let go of that church. A lot of church hurt there. And then but at the same time, aside from all of that, I was starting to kind of listen to certain podcasts and read certain books and kind of branching out of, do I actually believe this version of Christianity that was handed down to me, I think. And I getting fired really set me on a path of discovering like, what do I believe and who do I believe Jesus is? And by April of 2014, I was living in DC. I was 23 years old now. And Tinder, the dating app, had just come out. Like it was pretty brand new. It's not like it is now. Cause now I'm not on the dating apps right now, by the way, just as a caveat, but, I have been on them. Yeah. I know how it has changed. There's lots of, it's very different. It's just like, you only get 20 swipes a day. You got to pay 15 for premium if you want to see who like it's all this weird. It's like, yo, when this app first came out, it was free. Everybody that was young had it. And we were all swiping right. Like it felt like no one was swiping left. It was just like, nobody knew how to use it. It was just like, I don't know, like, we'll just see what happens. We all had thousands of matches. Like, I think if you were a young person, like age like 18 to 25 ish, which I was in that window, right in the middle, like 23, and you're living in a city, like a major metropolitan area, like DC or Atlanta or Denver or LA or what have you. It was just, I mean, it was wild. And I had like a couple girlfriends, but they were very, I would say legalistic, very, so the pendulum has now swung from legalistic to just, hey, like pants down, let's go. And let's just lose myself, I think, to a lot of, sexual promiscuity, alcoholism, which are my two main vices. I smoked some pot here and there, but that was never really my thing. And I never really did drugs, but definitely alcoholism and like sexual promiscuity. And stayed in that place for a couple of years. Ended up getting, I think we may have talked about this. Did I tell you when I was engaged?
Not on the podcast.
Yeah. So though now I'm in DC, I moved back home for a season with my parents and worked at a Kia car factory building cars off 85 in West Point, Georgia. It was like an hour and a half commute one way. It was like 3 hour commute every day.
Wow.
Back and forth. And that was like another like weird job I had where I was like building Kia cars on like an assembly line. And it made good money, but I'm a very creative person, and that's not my wheelhouse, but it was a way to make ends meet. I was paying my parents a very like little rent. I was barely home, so I was just kind of using it as a bed and paying them rent. I'm 24 when this is happening. So then I start like, I'm like, okay, I'm making good money at this job. I'm saving up. I'm going to move somewhere like that has a good music scene. And I looked at New York City. I'd spent a lot of time in New York City, especially when I was in DC. It was 3 hours away, and I would go up there. That's when I started doing stand up, to backtrack a little bit. And 2014 was when I first started doing stand up.
Wow.
And kind of dipped my toe in, and music, stand up, like anything creative, I've always had a passion for, and I've always had a fascination with, and tried to tinker with and do things with and see how far I can take it. Now I'm like living like my parents at this time are now in rural Georgia, and I'm not in a place where I like or where there's anything to do, but I'm just working. And I told myself like, I'm gonna work hard at this for a year. I can, hang out with friends on the weekends. I can go to Atlanta. Atlanta's only an hour away. I can, see people and do things. I took a couple trips, but the majority of the time I was just focused. Like, I'm going to work here for a year and save this money. And I did. I'd stay there 11 months. And then my tax return came for the 2015 year. And I was like, I'm done. I'm like, peace, I'm out. And I didn't even give a 2 weeks notice, because Kia had a policy that if you gave a 2 weeks notice, they would escort you to the, out the door by the end of the working day. And I was like, why would I make this commute just to get escorted out the door? Like, I'll just call them and tell them I can't make it. Like, this just makes it harder on you. Like, that's a dumb policy to have. But it's like an assembly line job that like it's blue collar, like anybody can do it. So I guess that's why. But it was kind of funny. And I guess they didn't do it with everybody. They did it with a lot of people. And I was just like, they're definitely going to do it with me. So I'm just, normally I would like leave well and give it 2 weeks, but I was like, I don't think it's important for this job. Who cares? And went to Athens, Georgia, which is a huge music town, big music legacy, REM, Drive-By Truckers, the B-52s, lots of people of Montreal, lots of names I'm forgetting right now, but huge music town. One of my favorite musicians, Jeff Rosenstock, he had a band called Bomb the Music Industry. Their whole album, Get Warmer, is about Athens. He's from Brooklyn in New York, or actually he's from Staten Island, but was living in Brooklyn for a while. He went and lived in Athens for a year, and he made this album called Get Warmer. And that's a great album for anybody that knows Athens. There's so many songs about different landmarks in Athens. Love that place, love that town, love that city. Was there for a couple years, one of the first things that happened when I was like a month into being there. I was playing a show at a venue. I think it doesn't exist anymore. It was called Livewire. This is April 2015. Met this girl. We started talking after the show, and then we started making out, and then we continued to see each other. And then 1 month after meeting each other, we moved in with each other, which I would say is unhealthy, and on both of our parts. Like, a healthy person is not going to do that. Very codependent on both of our parts, and we should not have been together. It was so unhealthy. There were so many problems on both sides, and I think this is the best story I can use to illustrate how dark of a time this was for me. We were together for a couple of years, and we broke up in 2017, July of 2017. Is that right? Yeah. So, yeah, something like that. I might have some dates wrong, but anyway, we were together for a while. I think it wasn't quite 2 years, and we were living together this whole time. Pretty much since we've known each other, we've been living together, which just causes problems immediately. Like, because we don't even know each other yet. So how are we going to live with each other and cohabitate and coexist? And, but about a year and a half in, shortly before we broke up, there was a night where she stabbed me. She had a kitchen knife and was like slashing at me. She was drunk. I was upset and yelling at her because I'd found out like she cheated on me again. And she was coming at me with the knife, and I held it up and stopped it. You probably can't see it on the screen, but I do have a scar on my hand where I stopped the knife from slashing something important that could have killed me, and then wrapped my hand in paper towels and went. Well, we had a roommate living with us at the time, and he heard her scream and came out because I grabbed the knife and threw it and then like restrained her, and she started screaming. So he came out and just saw a man restrain a woman and tackled me, which is good. But then he saw the blood and the knife and was like, and then he was like, go, like he took care of her, made me go back to my room. And, or no, he said, you need to go like get this taken care of because there's a pretty deep cut on the palm of my hand. I wrapped it in paper towels and said, I'm fine. And just went to bed. And then the next morning, to our roommate's credit, he did a good job that night of taking care of everybody. Cause I think he got in touch with her brother. Her brother came, picked her up. And then the next morning, I guess he let her dad in the house because I woke up with her dad standing over me and saying, can I see her hand? And I was like, yeah. And I like unwrapped it. And he was like, you need to go to the doctor. You need to get this taken care of. Like, you need to go to urgent care. And I said, I'll be fine. And then he said, I'm a doctor. And he is. And I was like, okay. And then he was like, asking me to move my fingers and stuff. And he said, yeah, I think, he was like, when did this happen? I said, I don't know, like 2 a.m. It's like 8 or 9 now. And he said, yeah, if you get there within the next 4 to 6 hours, you should be fine. But, and then he's like, told me which urgent care to go to and say like, Dr. So-and-so sent you. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
And then he was like, and then I remember he said, now she's going to pay for it. I've already talked to her. Are you going to press charges? And I said, no. And then he was like, and then he said, I would. This is
wow.
Which is really funny. But so that is I mean, that's just a story, but it's, I think it illustrates how dark of a season I was in.
I could see that.
Yeah.
The fact that it happened, but then the fact that you didn't go get it treated either. It's like you were not in a good place.
Not a good place mentally, but then this really further illustrates it. Generally in a relationship, when a partner stabs the other one, the stabbee, i.e. the victim, which would have been me in this case, breaks up with the stabber. Mm-hmm. But not in my case. In my case, I bought an engagement ring. I said, you know what'll fix this? Marriage.
Wow.
Yeah. Real codependent. Yeah, we were like, this relationship was like dead and gone like for over a year. And we just, we were forcing it. Like, it makes looking back, it's hilarious. The relationship had died. We should have broken up and moved on. And both of us equally refused to like bury the relationship and move on. We were just two ghosts like meeting in the night almost. And then we did eventually break up. I mean, the relationship wasn't, it never got better and it never got worse. I think it was that unhealthy from the beginning. Wow. And she had her issues and I had my issues, and we really honestly probably shouldn't have been dating. We should have been single and working on ourselves. And that is the time that sent me into like a deep, so we had the time when I was a youth pastor, or not youth pastor, youth director, because I wasn't ordained. But we had that time. That's 2014, like 2013 into 2014, New Year's Day. From then until now it's summer 2017. I'm finally wrestling with the reality of I've not been well the past few years, and I've given into a lot of darkness, and I've been just living for myself and what makes me feel good, and even to my own detriment, and just living in destruction. And I was pretty broken about that. And I have a friend, his name's Ben. His name's Ben Smith. It sounds like I'm making him up. And he's in witness protection, but I swear that's his name.
Your witness protection friend.
Yeah, Benjamin McDaniel Smith is his full name.
McDaniel.
Look him up. He's great.
Look him
up. He's a good guy. He works in the film industry, and at the time he was working on a Kevin Hart movie, and I was calling him and just crying on the phone to him, and he invited me to come live with him and his wonderful wife. Her name's Michael. Ben and Michael are two of the greatest people in my life, but also two of the people I sincerely believe God has used in mightier ways than probably anyone else other than my own mom and dad. So I moved in. He offered me a place. They offered me, Michael and Ben offered me a bed to stay in. They didn't charge me rent. Ben gave me a car, like it was his car, but he was letting me use it while I was getting back on my feet, and a job working in a field that I had no business being in, which is like the film industry. He did all the heavy legwork. He did go to school. Speaking of like earlier, he went to UGA, University of Georgia, and studied in the film school program. At the name escapes me at the moment, but the film school portion, and was working hard at it, putting in the legwork, and had worked himself up to a position where he was in a position to be able to hire people. He was working in the locations department, which does a lot of things that I didn't understand. I knew the locations department read scripts and then scouted locations, and he did some of that. I did not understand locations department. It's basically like PR. So you're kind of the liaison between the cast and crew and the public. And especially if you're shooting on location, not on a soundstage, you're like the point guy for the site rep. So if you're filming like at a school, for instance, like at a high school, we filmed some of the Kevin Hart movie Night School, the Kevin Hart movie entitled Night School. We filmed some of it at Westlake High School in Atlanta. You're working with like superintendents and people that you're kind of the first face they see. It's a big responsibility, and it's really funny when you have no idea you don't even know I didn't even know how the industry worked. And now I'm like in charge of like, I don't know, something silly like air conditioning or lights or something, like anything that's like location driven. Our team, which is location teams, are small. They're usually 4 or 5 people, depending on the production. They could be a lot bigger. Marvel movies have like 20, 30 people. But this one, it was a team of about 4 or 5 people, and I'm the bottom rung. Like I'm the lowest on the ladder, but still, because there's so much going on, so many moving parts, a lot of times things got pushed to me and I didn't know what I was doing, but did the best I could. And Ben took me along on a couple other projects. We worked on a couple TV shows together. That ended with me having a meltdown on the set of this like non-union show. And that was like that wasn't my last film job. I had a couple others, but it was a lot. And I still not really in the right place mentally, I would say. It took me, I was getting healthy, but I wasn't there yet. And that was a job that you're working a lot. You're working like 80, 90 hour weeks. And sometimes that takes a toll on people. Ben wears it really well. I had trouble with it, but
it's funny because you don't think of the film industry as a difficult industry, right? Like people, when they think of the film industry, it's like, oh, that's the artsy work for pampered movie stars. Don't really think about the crew at all, but it is grueling.
Some of it, yeah. I mean, it's a fun job. It was a real fun job, and I got to meet some cool people. And I also think I have a tendency to psych myself out and like stress myself out when I don't need to be. I don't need to be anxious, and God's working on me. I'm getting better at that. But Yeah, it's a fun job. It can be cushy at times, and then it can be, like you said, a lot of hard work and really grueling at other times. Um, and that's kind of the trade-off. Like, I think a lot of people don't understand all the crew works incredibly hard, like regardless of department. And there are some days that are really good, and it also depends on per project too. It's one of those unique things of, you're going to be working with, like, it's supposed to be like the grips are supposed to work with the makeup department and work with locations. Like, you're all supposed to be doing it together as a team. But if one department is selfish or hard to work with, that brings a whole production down. So there are some shows that are good to work on and healthy, and there are others that are, more times than not, it'll work more kind of like a dysfunctional family of, yeah, like there are certain people that are good to work with and certain people that are more difficult to. And that's like any job, right? Except for when it's a movie or a TV show and you're working on it, it's very hard. You're just trying to get the shot. That's what everyone's doing. Everyone's trying to get the shot. The actors, the director, all the way down to the PAs. Everyone's just trying to get the shot. But if you have, like, I don't know, there's a lot of vain personalities in that industry that think it's about them. And if you have one camera operator or one makeup artist or one locations person or one PA or one person that thinks they're, hot stuff, that makes it really hard to work with. That makes it really hard to work with.
That's really interesting, because you always kind of, again, film industry, most of the general public is so focused on the actors and expect them to be the hot stuff. But you could have but you could have like crew members that think they're hot stuff, and that derails everything.
More times than not, it's the crew members that think they are. Like, I never had a problem with Kevin Hart or Tiffany Haddish or Daniel Radcliffe or like these different people that I worked on projects with. Like, they were great. Like, talk to them. They're normal people, and they're actors or whatever, celebrities, fine. It's always like camera B operator that thinks he doesn't have to pay attention to the sign that says "Do not enter." Like, it's always like, are you like, come on, dude?
It's like the Christian Bale meltdown.
Yeah,
about the guy walking through the scene, and then people are like, Christian, you just need to take a walk. He's like, I need to take a walk. That guy took a walk through my scene, right?
Yeah, I never really experienced any actors have meltdowns like that. I know they happen, and I think one even happened on a show I was working on, but I wasn't present for it.
So you had a meltdown though, which kind of ended your
in my film career. It was it was dumb. Ben was in an argument with someone, and they were like arguing with Ben, and then I just stepped in and went like ape shit, and it was like, and everyone got real scared, and a producer like escorted me off. And then I went and I was sitting in my car crying. And then Ben, I was going through, this is still real fresh in that breakup too. Like, I was not in a healthy place. Like, it was just a couple months after I broke up with this girl, and lots of like in my passenger seat of my car, just lots of fast food wrappers and the fast food cup, lots of Taco Bell wrappings and Dairy Queen. Those were my two go-tos at the time, was Dairy Queen and Taco Bell. Chick-fil-A, lots of cups and garbage to get over. I had my own car now because it's a few months. I guess it was a little, I think this was early, like spring. Yeah, it was spring 2018. So I was kind of past that breakup, but was still, I hadn't handled it. Like, I guess I didn't address it and handle it. Like, I said I did, and I thought I did, because I went to therapy and I like took the steps, but I wasn't doing the work, I guess. I wasn't like examining my heart and thinking like, okay, like where am I at, and what have I like invested into, and what's unhealthy about me, and how can I get better? And I was figuring those things out, but I wasn't there yet. And I do have some anger issues that God is teaching me on and working with, like, he continues to teach me and help me get better at. Anyway, I'm sitting in my car and I'm like crying, and then I see Ben in like the rearview mirror, and he comes up to the passenger door. He just climbs over all this mountain of fast food garbage and just kind of like clears up off a spot and like sits down. And that's how you know you have a good friend, when they literally just push aside the garbage in your life to sit there and be in it with you, you know?
Yeah.
And he goes, "You all right?"
That's like a sermon thing, you could say.
Oh yeah.
It sounds like that should be in a sermon.
Oh yeah, I'm preaching now. And then
yeah, you are. We're doing church here.
Yeah, let's have some church. I like church. And then Ben says, "Are you all right?" And I said, "No." And then like I'm just, crying. He said, "Everybody back at set is afraid you're like gonna come back and like punch that guy." And he said, "But they don't know you. None of those people know you." I said, You guys don't know Paul. He's not like that." And he said, "I knew you'd be right here crying in your car."
Wow.
And he was like,
that's awesome.
You're working through some stuff and we'll figure this out. And, I'm still your friend and that sort of stuff. And he went back to set. And then this was in Atlanta. We were filming in Atlanta. I took a day trip to Athens for the day because that's my happy place.
Yeah.
And I just spent the weekend there with some friends. Went and some of my friends were doing a comedy show, so I went and watched them do. It wasn't stand up; it was improv. I watched them do like an improv troupe, do some improv, and then went to like a party, and then headed back and like kind of had a change of perspective, and ended up moving back to Athens. Got pretty heavy into stand-up and was going in between Athens, Atlanta, doing stand-up occasionally in some place outside of those two cities. And that's kind of what I was doing when as I got shot. I got carjacked and I got shot 13 times. We're now, the timeline is now May 2019.
Yeah.
May 2019, I'd moved back from Athens to Atlanta because I was plugged in at this church in Atlanta that I was really involved in. And I'd been at this apartment like 6 days, and it was a gated community. And the gate was left open, security wasn't on duty, lots of different things that shouldn't have been happening that were happening. And two guys came in, one had a 22 and one had a 9mm, and I got shot a total of 13 times in both legs. My left foot, both legs, my stomach, chest, and left arm. And woke up in the ICU with a ventilator, couldn't speak and couldn't move. Lost a lot of blood. And pretty much everybody I've ever known in my life, most people that I've known in my life were there for I was in the hospital for a month. So I was like 3 weeks ICU and then another week in like a normal hospital room.
So you had a ton of people visit you.
Yeah. From all over the country.
Wow.
Even all over the world. Like one of my closest friends, we were talking about the ship earlier. His name's Matt. He came and spent some time. We stayed with Ben. He came, and this was after I'd healed a little bit, but yeah, he came and spent some time with me. He came and spent some time with me I was fresh out of my wheelchair. So I was in a wheelchair for a while, and then I was walking with a cane, and then I was walking without a cane. That's kind of where I'm at now, but I'm used to my body now and its limitation. But backing up, it was a hard 2 years. Like, yeah, because we're just at that little over that 2 year mark. And I would say from May 2019 up until probably April of 2021, deep darkness, dude. Just, yeah. PTSD, it's expected, but like isolated in my room. People like these people I'm naming, Matt, Ben, like these friends in my life, pastors in my life, different people that care about me and love me, reaching out, texting me, making sure, just let me know, hey, we're here. Like, we love you. But nobody knowing what to do. I'm recovering at my parents' house. And for the first few months, I couldn't even bathe myself. Like, it felt so I don't know the word, but it felt so strange to
Mm.
be in a wheelchair, not be able to use 3 out of my 4 limbs. And my dad would have to like pick me up, move me from the wheelchair to the shower chair, and like help me bathe myself, really.
Mm.
And I just got in such a deep, dark place of hopelessness. And I do want to back up for a second.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't miss this part, and I think it's kind of an important part of the story. Right before I did get shot, this Ben, my friend I was telling you about, worked in the film industry, good guy Ben, as I like to call. He and his wife started inviting me to go to church with them, and I got plugged into their church, and it ended up being a very, very, very helpful community for me.
Mm-hmm.
And God really met me there and used the pastors there and the people there to show me more and more of who he was. And that was like, people talk about being reborn or being rebirthed or getting saved, like getting saved if you're a Calvinist, or when God saved you if you're an Arminian, whatever it is, whatever term you want to use. I think I look back at my life and see that there's several different rebirthing periods. I think God's had his hand on me my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
But this was a big one. And it was, God was showing me more of who I am God was showing me more of who I am when my identity is found in Christ and not in myself. And he was teaching me that faithfully, Sunday after Sunday, week after week, as I'm living in Athens and making this commute on Sundays to this church in Atlanta, which makes no sense. Like, I think churches should be, and at the time it was a season where I think that is what God wanted me to do, but I would not recommend it. I think churches should be a localized expression of the body of Christ. It's good. It's hard because you want to be in the community, which is why I moved to Atlanta. But as I moved to Atlanta, that was kind of, God was leading me away from the church anyway. And I was doing stand-up a lot. And I kind of got really hard into stand-up. And then this tragedy happened that was of no doing of my own. It's hard when sometimes things like that happen when you're at a place you're not supposed to be. Like, oh, well, he kept selling crack cocaine to these people, and he was part of this gang. Like, I was a stand-up comedian, and I'm sober. I've been sober since September of 2017. Which that's a fun story. Maybe we can circle back to that if you remember. But I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to church. I'm trying my best to follow the Lord and doing these things. And then this happens. It really screws your mind up, And I was just in this place of just, God, where are you? What is this? Why am I hurting? And I still don't have the answer to some of those questions, but what I can say is that where I'm at now is a much healthier place mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually than I was even before that shooting happened. Physically, there's a caveat of I have physical limitations now, but I am, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I can honestly say I'm in a healthier place than I've probably ever been.
Wow.
And one of the things I think God has shown me lately is the mountaintop experiences would mean nothing if we didn't wade through the valley, There's joy and gladness cease to exist without suffering. And I don't understand suffering, and I don't have all the answers of why there is suffering.
Yeah.
But one of the answers I think God has led me to that gives me peace and comfort is joy and gladness. Like all the emotions you love to feel, like we love to feel, like joy, laughter, passion, intimacy, all these things. I don't think they would mean anything if there weren't severe storms and trials to walk through. Like, without this suffering, how would we know that that's good? And how the relief and the release on the other side of it. And sometimes sometimes you're in a real rough place. Like I was in a season of like sackcloth and ashes for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I was even reading, speaking of Ben, I was reading texts with him from, I think it was like from sometime a year ago, sometime 2020, where I was saying, God is not good. God doesn't give a shit. God's an asshole. Like all these things that I do not believe right now. And I don't think they were true when I was saying them, but I truly felt them. And I was, and that's okay, because God's big enough to handle, I think, our emotions.
Do you get the sense that when you were at that point where you were like, God is an asshole, God doesn't give a shit, that God is standing there just kind of understanding, like, so that, no, I get that's where you're at. He's not mad that you said that, like it's because it's funny because we were doing that series on Jesus and John Wayne. And we went through a series of things that Bill Gothard, had as his stipulations for his church, right? And the God that he presented was just like, respect authority, and I know all your thoughts and all this stuff. And the whole time I'm like reading this, I'm like, wow, this is not the same God I believe in. Like my God's pretty chill. Like he knows my every thought, but he's pretty chill about it.
Right.
And it's like, he's the loving father. And it's like, so it's like, Dad, I hate you. You're an asshole. You don't give a shit about me. And the father's just like,
yeah, we're all punk teenage sons. Like that's what, or we're punk teenage sons and daughters. Like when we're, when I was a teenager, I wasn't the nicest to my father sometimes.
Yeah.
And my dad, it hurt my dad, but he didn't hate me. And he wasn't, if anything, when I would say that, he would entreat me and say, no, I love you. And I think that is what God was doing, whether I saw that or not.
Absolutely.
It's like, when, if you have a 5-year-old kid and your kid's throwing a temper tantrum because they don't understand what's happening, you don't hate your kid. It can be annoying. You might be annoyed with your kid, but you still, your love is still unconditional for them.
Well, and it's like, I always want the best for my children. And I really think that's what God wants for us. And so, I mean, looking at, like, you talk about like, well, without suffering, there's no joy and stuff like that. But it's like, I just keep thinking your suffering has been so immense. And for you to say that is so powerful, because it's like, you're still suffering. Like there's still things.
Oh yeah. They'll be with me for the rest of my life. Sure.
Yeah.
But I had a conversation with an old saint last night on the phone. He's in his late 60s, and a mentor of mine, his name's Dr. John. And I was talking about some things in my life, and recently I've come into some, a good place financially, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with this money and different things. And I was talking to him about stewarding that well. And he said, yeah. And like, we talked about that stuff, and he listened and he agreed, and, asked some questions. They said, yeah, and I think you're right. That's a good place to be in. But, I think more important than the stewarding the finances, you do understand you've been giving a lot of suffering to steward as well. And I never heard anyone phrase it quite like that.
Huh.
And I paused in the phone call and said, you said steward the suffering. Is that what you said? And he said, yeah, most people don't walk through this severe of a suffering, especially someone as young as you. And I think God, for whatever reason, is walking you through that, and to steward that suffering well is a huge thing. I had never thought of it that way. But then if you look at scripture and you look at people that suffered and suffered tremendously, they were often people that the suffering it had a purpose. And it's hard, because this is one of the things that I had a hard time dealing with when I was in my deep place of darkness. Of this makes no sense. Like, if I'm a loving father and I have a child, I do not want them to suffer. I want to protect them at all costs from suffering. I do not want them to suffer.
Right.
And it made me feel like God is an abusive father, but I think I was just looking at it wrong, and I was asking the wrong questions, because I don't think God wants me to suffer. I don't think God wanted me to get shot 13 times. But I also think that God gives every single person on earth. I believe God is the creator of all people, and I believe he gives all people choice. We have the choice to, every single one of us has a choice every day to buy someone lunch or to buy a gun and shoot someone. We have those choices. And if we didn't, God would just be a puppet master. And so I don't think it's any lack of God's power. I don't think it would, I think it shows God's goodness that he allows, like, there is evil in the world. He doesn't want there to be evil in the world. And one day there won't be, based on my understanding of theology. But yeah, there is evil in the world. He doesn't want there to be evil in the world, but he's a good God and he loves his children. And when I say his children, everyone, like, we're all sons and daughters, I believe, of the creator, of our creator, God and Lord. And he loves us. He loves all of us. And that's sometimes hard to grasp. Like, I think he even loves the people that shot me. And I forgive those people, but that's not easy to do. But it is, I do sit in a place where I'm like, I'm not concerned with vengeance, or like, even I had to tell the district attorney to quit calling me with updates about these two guys. I'm like, I don't want to know. Like, I've given that over to the Lord. And what they did was an evil and cruel thing to hurt me, but that's none of my concern. I forgive them in my heart. I don't want to ever have to look them in the eyes again. Because of the PTSD that sits with me. And that's okay. Like, you don't, I heard a story. This is insane, John. I heard a story couple days ago. Yeah, it was yesterday. I heard a story yesterday, but it was a recording from a sermon that was preached on this past Sunday from 2 days ago. This preacher was saying that if you truly forgive someone, you don't talk about it, and you truly forgive them, and you don't talk about, like, the whatever hurt you, the sin that hurt you. For me, in my case, it's a very severe one of being shot 13 times, like violence and assault.
I don't think that works.
What's that?
I don't think that works.
well, listen for a second. The story that he was saying was about this girl that came into his church and said, I love this story. She said she was raped and said, they want me to testify in court, but I can't do that because I've forgiven them. And the pastor was like, whoa. Like, wow. You can talk about it. But that, I think that testament of that is the true forgiveness of Christ, I think. And like, he helped her out and said, no, this is a good thing. Like, there is justice and justification and repercussions, and there are consequences. And, but he was using that to illustrate the point. Like, if this girl can say that, like, who are we to say, like, we're upset because someone said something behind our back,
Yeah. And I think, like, there are a lot of things, that people will do or say, and they ask for forgiveness, and you say, I forgive you. And I know in my mind, I cannot bring that up with that person again because I forgave them. Right? Like, it's just like, I won't. But, like, to still talk about the residual effects of what happened to you.
Oh yeah, no. Yeah, that's not what I was saying.
I think when I heard that, I was like, what?
No. That's not what I was saying. I just misspoke, if that's what you heard.
No. And I may have misheard it, but I'm like, it sounded like toxic theology. But
I probably didn't use the right words.
This woman, though, in the story, got the same message. She's like, well, I can't talk about this. I can't talk about it in court. And it's like,
but she did go and talk about it.
And what she did, which is awesome.
And I think that's true for, like, I do think that is true for, like, if we don't forgive people like this, I mean, this is true. I do believe this. I don't know. You might say sex theology, but I do think I do have to forgive those people. Like, if I don't forgive them, that's not going to hurt them. That's going to hurt me. Like if you walk around with forgiveness, but the forgiveness doesn't
thing to do. It is
right, but that forgiveness doesn't mean what you said. It doesn't mean, to your point, it doesn't mean like I go and I hug them and like we're friends and I never talk. Like no, like they're
or you can't talk about why
no
has all this damage to it because it's like no, I can't talk about it. I forgave them.
That's not what I meant. I meant
yeah.
I could very well sit in a very deep and bitter place right now and say, I hope that they die and get death row. And most people probably wouldn't judge me. They'd be like, I'd feel the same way. But I think that's not a healthy place to sit. And that's not. And that is counterintuitive for sure and countercultural. But I believe that Jesus is counterintuitive and countercultural. That's what I was trying to say. So I apologize for not communicating that clearly.
No, it's all good.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I think that's been about an hour.
Yeah, a little over, I think.
Is there anything else you want to say?
I do want to circle back around to the story about why I am sober from alcohol. I think it'd be a nice and fun place.
Okay, let's do that as the closure.
Yeah. This will be the closer. In the stand-up set, this is the closer. You said closure. This is closure.
Yeah,
we need closure.
We need closure.
We need closure. Are we having a fight?
Closure.
We need closure.
That's French Canadian for closer.
Is it?
No.
I believed you. I don't know. I'm not up there. You're up there.
No, yeah, I know. You guys don't know anything about the land of Canada.
Yeah. And what part are you in again? I always forget. Toronto? Close to Toronto?
Calgary, Alberta.
No, Calgary. I got it. I was off. Okay. Yeah. So just because I mentioned this, and if anyone was one, because I know when I listen to podcasts, sometimes someone will say, oh, we could circle back to that. And then they don't. I'm like, what was that story? So I hope I'm tying up every loose end. When I was going through that bad breakup with that fiance that I was engaged to, that toxic relationship we were both part of, I got really into booze as a way to cope. And it so happens that after a Georgia football game, which are big drinking events in Athens, Georgia, I found myself hopping from party to party. I had a designated driver, a good friend, and we were driving through downtown, and I was like laying out the window. And there are these police that had just broken up a fight, and I looked out and said, hey, fuck the police. And then they came. I thought that would be funny. They did not. Turns out cops hate it when you yell that at them.
I hate that song.
Yeah. And so I have a record now, which is hilarious because anyone that knows me is like, you have a record? And yeah, I do. And that's when I decided, maybe I'm a little too dependent on alcohol and started going to AA meetings and working on that. And I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with booze. I think alcohol is fine. I'm not trying to say don't drink. I am trying to say that if you find yourself yelling obscenities at police officers, that maybe you might want to consider trying sober life. It might be healthier for you. But I just remembered that's a really funny story. That was another part. Because I think I did a pretty good job of giving you the footnotes of my life story. I probably missed some things here and there, but.
And I mean, I'm sure you got more stories you can tell, and you'll be back on the podcast. We'll do some more.
I would love to. It'll be a good time.
Episodes. I know we want to talk Acts 29 and maybe even wrap up the Jesus and John Wayne discussion once and for all.
Man, I don't know if I'm the right person as a white cisgendered male to talk about the Jesus and John Wayne discussion, but I'll give it my best shot.
All right. Well, thank you, Paul. It's always a pleasure talking with you. And I guess we did ADD Masterminds. Now we've done the Wax Museum. So
yeah, we did. Check it out. ADD Masterminds.
And then if anybody wants to get in touch with you.
Yeah, I am off social media. So write me a letter and address it to P.O. Box. I'm just kidding. You can email me at Paul Daniel Edgar, PaulDanielEdgar @gmail.com. I will read your email and I will respond.
Yeah. Well, thank you again.
Thank you, Bridge LeBlanc.
Okay.
Air Smudge.